It was a calm Saturday afternoon, the kind where the only sounds should have been birds chirping and distant lawn mowers humming along. I was outside, checking the car in my driveway, when suddenly an ear-piercing scream cut through the neighborhood. I froze. My eyes scanned the street, and there she was, a woman, phone already pressed to her ear, striding furiously toward me. Her face was flushed, eyes wild, her gestures frantic and exaggerated. "Yes. I need to report illegal obstruction," she screamed, voice cracking with rage. "He's blocking my driveway. Send someone right now." I stopped in my tracks, unsure whether to laugh or brace for the confrontation. My car hadn't moved in years. There was no obstruction, no harassment, just the perception of wrongdoing fueled by entitlement. But entitlement has a way of escalating quickly when paired with a smartphone, and the neighbors were already peeking from their windows, drawn by the theatrical display. Curtains twitched. Porch doors creaked open. A small crowd began to gather, all silently bearing witness to her performance. I stepped forward, hands raised slightly, my tone calm but firm. "Ma'am, this is my driveway," I said. "There's no obstruction." "You're mistaken." She didn't hear me, or more likely, she refused to. Instead, she continued her tirade into the phone, spinning stories, inventing threats, and painting herself as a victim in urgent need of rescue. I let her rage build around me like a storm cloud, knowing that escalation works best when patience and composure counter fury. Neighbors whispered and murmured among themselves. Some pulled out phones to record, others simply gawked. She was performing, and she knew her audience. She gestured at my car, shouted claims that had no basis, and somehow expected immediate consequences. But I stood silent, composed, observing her theatrics with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the truth and had tools of authority she had yet to realize. Minutes passed. She finally ended her call, holding the phone like a trophy, chest puffed with triumph. "You're in trouble now," she declared, glaring at me. But she had no idea. The storm she thought she controlled was about to meet the calm eye of authority, and in that moment, the entire street, every neighbor, and every witness would see a twist she would never forget. Her chest heaved as she lowered the phone, convinced that victory was hers. Her eyes scanned the gathering crowd of neighbors, each peeking from windows or porches, as if to confirm their admiration. "You're going to get in so much trouble," she shouted, voice trembling with indignation. She had called for backup, convinced that law enforcement would arrive to enforce her version of reality. I remained calm, hands visible, body relaxed. Patience was my strategy. In moments like these, anger only escalates conflict, while composure commands authority silently. The more she screamed, the more obvious it became to the witnesses that her story didn't align with reality. The driveway was empty. My car was parked entirely on my property, completely compliant with every rule she claimed I was violating. Neighbors whispered among themselves, some cautiously nodding in my direction, others still unsure. Children peeked from behind their parents, curious but silent. The tension was tangible, a thick layer of disbelief and anticipation hanging over the street. Every gesture she made seemed to emphasize her anger, yet revealed her lack of evidence. Her performance was precise, deliberate, but ultimately built on false assumptions. I spoke again, my tone deliberate but calm. "Ma'am, this is my property. There's no obstruction. I'm happy to clarify anything you think is unclear." She ignored me, her focus entirely on the phone call she had just made, replaying the narrative in her mind like a script. The audience around her reinforced her delusion, giving weight to her performance that didn't exist in reality. Then came the subtle moment that would shift everything. I reached into my pocket and touched the badge tucked inside my wallet. Not in arrogance, but in preparation. When the law arrives, it can be silent, subtle, and authoritative without a single shout. The officer who would soon arrive would confirm not only my claims but the authority I carried, authority she had assumed she could manipulate with a frantic phone call. Sirens wove through the neighborhood, low at first, then growing louder. Her face lit with triumph as she turned to neighbors. "See? Justice is coming," she exclaimed. But she had no idea who she was about to face. The patrol car approached, lights off, arriving silently, and the officer stepped out, scanning the scene with professional precision. Recognition in his eyes shifted the air instantly. The moment she thought she controlled had already begun to unravel. The officer's eyes widened subtly, recognition flickering across his face. He stopped mid-step, straightened, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod that only I noticed. The woman, oblivious to the exchange, continued her tirade into the phone, insisting on obstruction, threats, and harassment. Every exaggerated accusation she made now seemed increasingly absurd. "He's threatening me," she cried, waving the phone dramatically. "He refuses to move his car, and I feel unsafe." Her voice cracked with urgency. Neighbors leaned forward from windows and porches, watching every gesture, every word. The street had become a theater, and she was performing for an audience that had silently shifted allegiance. The officer raised a hand, signaling her to pause. He began asking calm, precise questions, each one revealing inconsistencies in her story. "Ma'am, can you show me exactly where the obstruction is?" She pointed dramatically at my car, perfectly parked on my property. The officer's gaze flicked to the car, then back to me, noting the obvious truth. I spoke next, measured and factual. I explained that this was my driveway, provided documentation, and described the situation clearly. No emotion, no exaggeration, just facts. The officer listened intently, nodding slightly, while she continued interrupting. Each claim she made unraveled under calm scrutiny. Then came the moment that shifted everything. I reached into my pocket, subtly letting the badge glint in the sunlight. The officer straightened immediately, his demeanor formal and respectful. Her eyes locked on the badge. Her confident smirk faltered. For the first time, panic flickered across her face. What is that?" she stammered, voice quivering. "I'm the police chief," I replied calmly, meeting her gaze steadily. A profound silence fell. Birds seemed to pause mid-flight. Neighbors froze, some whispering. The woman's mouth opened, closed, then opened again, as she processed the revelation. The authority she had tried to summon with a phone call was standing directly in front of her. The balance of power had shifted instantly. Her performance, once commanding and theatrical, dissolved under the weight of truth and authority. The crowd of witnesses watched her disbelief unfold, the lesson clear: entitlement and false accusations crumble when confronted with calm, undeniable authority. She finally understood that this confrontation was no longer hers to control. Her posture faltered, shoulders slumping as the reality sank in. The confident, angry figure who had stormed my driveway hours earlier now seemed small and uncertain. Her chest heaved, voice trembling. I didn't know. She trailed off, realizing that theatrics and assumptions could not overcome truth and authority. I kept my tone calm, measured. "There's no need to escalate further," I said. "This is my property, and everything you've claimed is unfounded. Let's resolve this respectfully." My words were not meant to humiliate, but to teach a lesson in accountability and perspective. The street had fallen silent, neighbors watching with rapt attention. The officer confirmed quietly, without fanfare, that I was indeed the police chief. The woman's eyes widened again, this time with dawning comprehension. Her entire narrative collapsed under the undeniable authority before her. She shifted nervously, glancing at neighbors, hoping for allies, only to see silent witnesses absorbing the lesson. I'm sorry," she muttered, voice low, the bravado entirely gone. Her phone hung limply by her side, no longer a weapon, just an object of failed intimidation. The magnitude of her mistake settled in fully. Every accusation, every raised voice, had been unnecessary, and the consequences, though quiet, were profound. Neighbors began murmuring, some nodding subtly, others whispering to each other. The tension that had dominated the street hours ago began to dissipate. The lesson was clear: escalation is easy, but resolution requires calm, clarity, and respect. Authority exercised wisely can defuse situations without confrontation, a reality she now experienced firsthand. The officer addressed her gently, emphasizing responsibility. False calls to emergency services have consequences, he said, recording the interaction. She nodded quickly, swallowing her pride. The crowd absorbed the warning silently. The quiet authority, the calm approach, and the undeniable truth had reshaped the dynamics of the neighborhood. For a moment, the street returned to stillness. The sun cast long shadows across the driveway, illuminating both my car and the space where confrontation had unfolded. What had begun as chaos now became a subtle but lasting reminder of accountability, patience, and the weight of truth. As she finally walked away, I took a slow breath. The storm was over, and the lesson had been delivered not with anger, but with calm authority and composure. The neighbors would remember this moment, and so would she. The morning after the confrontation, the street felt noticeably different. The tension from yesterday had left a lingering lesson in everyone's mind. Neighbors exchanged polite nods, cars were parked carefully, and casual greetings returned. The drama of the previous day had faded, but the impact of authority and patience lingered in subtle ways. I stepped outside to inspect the driveway, observing small changes in behavior. The woman who had called 911 moved carefully, her phone tucked away, gestures measured. There was no shouting, no dramatics, just cautious awareness. The street itself seemed calmer, as if absorbing the lesson of respect, patience, and consequences. Reflection brought clarity. Entitlement escalates conflict, but calm authority prevents it from spiraling. Her anger, amplified by assumptions and performance, had met its match in composure and truth. Authority had not needed force, just presence. It was a reminder that real power is quiet and patient, and its lessons last longer than any spectacle. At the station, I recounted the story to colleagues not as gossip, but as a case study. Every call, no matter how minor, carries consequences, I said. Patience, calm communication, and clear authority prevent escalation far more effectively than anger or confrontation. They nodded, recognizing how easily misunderstandings could erupt into larger conflicts. Later, I glanced down the street. Children rode bikes freely, neighbors chatted over fences, and life returned to its normal rhythm. Yet beneath the calm, awareness had grown. People remembered the earlier chaos, and their behavior shifted accordingly. The event had left an invisible mark, shaping conduct without overt enforcement. The woman's actions, my restraint, and the officer's quiet confirmation created a ripple effect. Every observer absorbed a lesson in accountability. Conflict need not dominate, resolution is often quiet, subtle, and effective. Sometimes, the most enduring victories are invisible, felt only in behavior, awareness, and restraint. As the sun began to set, I parked in my driveway, taking a slow, measured breath. The concrete and car remained unchanged, yet their meaning had transformed. What had once been a stage for chaos now symbolized calm authority, patient intervention, and the power of truth. The neighborhood had been reminded: entitlement and assumptions are fragile, but integrity and composure endure. And sometimes, the smallest gestures like calm patience teach the most profound lessons, leaving impressions that outlast anger, shouting, or temporary drama. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. Driveways were respected, greetings exchanged more genuinely, and casual conversations replaced cautious glances. The woman who had called 911 now moved deliberately, careful not to escalate small disagreements. Her phone, once a weapon of entitlement, stayed tucked away. Awareness had replaced arrogance. I noticed her one afternoon tending her garden. She paused, glanced toward my driveway, and gave a small, tentative nod. I returned it with a simple acknowledgement. No words were necessary. Mutual understanding had quietly replaced confrontation. The street itself seemed lighter, calmer, infused with subtle lessons of respect and patience. It struck me how perspective can shift when pride and theatrics are removed. She was no longer the instigator, she had become a neighbor mindful of boundaries. I had changed too. The incident had reinforced the importance of restraint, measured authority, and thoughtful communication in maintaining community harmony. Later at the station, I shared the story with colleagues. Not as gossip, but as a lesson in authority and de-escalation. Every call, no matter how trivial it seems, can escalate if handled poorly. Calm, consistent authority, paired with patience, can diffuse even the most dramatic scenarios, preventing unnecessary conflict and embarrassment. That evening, I parked in my driveway and surveyed the street. Life appeared ordinary, yet ordinary felt earned. Children played freely, neighbors exchanged nods, and a sense of awareness and respect hung subtly in the air. The neighborhood had absorbed the lesson not through fear, but through quiet demonstration of authority and integrity. The driveway and car remained physically unchanged, yet their symbolic meaning had shifted. They now represented restraint, truth, and the quiet power of integrity. Authority need not dominate a scene to command respect. Sometimes its presence, calm and assured, is enough to prevent conflict entirely. This incident had become a quiet reminder: entitlement and drama fade quickly, but understanding, patience, and accountability endure. The neighborhood had learned, the woman had changed, and the lesson of calm authority had rippled outward in ways no shouting or confrontation could have achieved. Months later, the street had fully returned to normal, or so it seemed. Beneath the surface, awareness lingered. Conversations were calmer, minor disputes resolved with thoughtfulness, and neighbors approached interactions with caution. The woman who had called 911 had transformed her approach completely, demonstrating patience and respect she had previously lacked. One afternoon, I saw her walking past my driveway. She paused briefly, gave a respectful wave, and continued on. No dramatics, no phone raised, no gesturing. That single nod carried unspoken acknowledgement: the lesson had been learned, and authority had been recognized without confrontation. The entire neighborhood had absorbed the message indirectly. The children's laughter in the street carried no tension. Adults interacted with subtle mindfulness. Even small gestures, a wave, a door held open, a careful parking choice, signaled a collective understanding that entitlement could no longer dominate daily interactions. At the station, I shared the ongoing effects with colleagues. Authority isn't about asserting power, I explained. It's about restraint, clarity, and patience. And sometimes the most effective lessons aren't loud, they're quietly observed and internalized. My team nodded, reflecting on how small, controlled actions can ripple outward with lasting impact. That evening, I returned to my driveway. I looked around the street bathed in soft golden light. Life appeared ordinary, yet the meaning behind it had shifted. The driveway was no longer just property, it was a symbol of calm, measured authority, the kind that shapes behavior without raising a voice. Even the woman who had caused chaos now moved carefully, aware of her actions. No confrontation, no escalation, only lessons learned. The ripple of accountability extended far beyond the initial incident, influencing behavior subtly, quietly, and effectively. It became clear that true authority doesn't demand spectacle or dramatics. Its power lies in the consistency of action, the patience to wait, and the wisdom to let truth and composure resolve conflict naturally. The neighborhood had internalized this truth, and life had shifted accordingly. The driveway, car, and street were unchanged physically, but everything else, the respect, awareness, and subtle authority, had transformed. What was once a battleground had quietly become a lesson in human behavior, patience, and accountability. By now, the neighborhood had absorbed the lesson almost entirely. The tense energy that once dominated the street had dissipated, replaced by cautious respect and subtle awareness. Minor disputes were handled calmly, greetings were exchanged genuinely, and driveways were no longer points of conflict. The ripple effect of the incident had quietly reshaped daily life. One afternoon, I noticed her, the woman who had called 911, working carefully in her front yard. She moved deliberately, her phone tucked away, no dramatics, no pointing fingers. Our eyes met briefly, and she offered a small, respectful nod. I nodded back. No words were needed. Mutual understanding had taken root. It was remarkable how quickly perspective can shift when pride and theatrics are removed. She had transformed from a belligerent instigator into a mindful neighbor, aware of her actions and their consequences. The neighborhood, too, had changed. Observers had internalized the lessons of patience, authority, and accountability, shaping the culture quietly and effectively. Later at the station, I shared updates with colleagues. Authority is most effective when paired with patience, I explained. Escalation only grows when assumptions, pride, and theatrics dominate. Calm, consistent presence teaches lessons far more effectively than shouting ever could. My team nodded, recognizing the subtle but lasting impact of such encounters. That evening, I returned to my driveway and surveyed the street. Sunlight filtered through trees, casting long, warm shadows. Life appeared ordinary, yet the ordinary had transformed. The driveway and car remained physically the same, but their meaning had evolved. They now symbolized calm authority, patience, and the power of measured truth. The woman's actions, my response, and the community's observations had created an invisible web of awareness. Everyone had learned, escalation is fleeting, but accountability and composure endure. Authority doesn't need drama, its quiet, consistent presence is enough to reshape behavior and restore order. The lesson was clear: respect and patience carry further than confrontation and outrage. Even without overt confrontation, influence had spread, shaping the neighborhood in ways she and everyone else would remember for months. Calm authority had prevailed. The street was no longer a stage for chaos but a testament to restraint, clarity, and the enduring power of truth. The neighborhood had quietly grown wiser, and the events that had once caused tension were now remembered as a turning point. By now, the incident had become a quiet legend in the neighborhood. Her dramatic 911 call was no longer a spectacle, it was a lesson in accountability, patience, and the power of calm authority. The woman who had caused chaos had transformed into a mindful neighbor, aware of boundaries and consequences. One afternoon, she passed my driveway and offered a respectful wave. I nodded back, and no words were exchanged. That simple acknowledgement carried more weight than any argument or confrontation. The street had returned to normal, yet the subtle shift in awareness lingered, a reminder of the lessons learned. Neighbors continued to interact with newfound consideration. Children played freely, adults chatted calmly, and driveways were respected without incident. The tension that had once gripped the street had been replaced with awareness. Observers understood that dramatics and entitlement could not overcome truth, patience, and measured authority. At the station, I recounted the ongoing impact to my colleagues. Authority doesn't need to dominate, I explained. It works quietly, consistently, and patiently. When paired with integrity, it teaches lessons that last far longer than shouting, confrontation, or intimidation ever could. They nodded, appreciating how subtle actions could ripple outward and shape behavior permanently. Reflecting later in my driveway, I considered how quickly situations can escalate and how effectively they can be diffused when handled with calm authority. The driveway, car, and street were physically unchanged, but the neighborhood had shifted. The space that had once hosted confrontation now symbolized integrity, patience, and the quiet power of truth. The woman had learned humility and awareness. Neighbors had learned that escalation is unnecessary when authority is calm and measured. And I had reaffirmed a fundamental truth: real influence is subtle, consistent, and rooted in truth. It leaves no scars, only long-lasting lessons. The incident had started with chaos, a misplaced 911 call, and theatrical outrage, but it ended quietly, with understanding, respect, and a community subtly transformed. The most meaningful victories are often invisible, but their effects endure far longer than drama, noise, or conflict. As the sun set over the street, the lesson lingered in every glance, every nod, and every quiet interaction. Calm authority had prevailed, and the neighborhood had grown wiser, patient, and more respectful, proof that integrity and composure can turn even the most absurd confrontation into a lasting teaching moment.